It was Wednesday, the 25th of November, 1998, the day before Thanksgiving. After finishing with my previous employer, I went to the library in Jamestown to let them know that I could start my new job with them right away. And the first thing I did for the library, even before I was officially on their payroll, was to put up their Christmas tree that very afternoon. It was the Jamestown Library's wish book tree. Every year the library put up the same artificial tree, which would be decorated by their patrons as the Christmas season progressed. The library staff would choose a list of children's and young adult books that we wished we had the money for. One of our volunteers would then make a representation of the cover of each book, and we kept these in a basket by the tree. People could either buy the book they chose and give it to the library, or they could donate the money that the book would cost, and we'd take care of the rest. As people chose their books, they would write their names inside the cards representing the books and hang them as ornaments on the tree. It was a nice little fundraiser, which everybody enjoyed. And each of the 7 years that I worked there, I always put up the tree just before we closed for Thanksgiving. It was my personal way to celebrate my work anniversary and to give thanks for a job I enjoyed. One of the first wish books which was donated to the library the very first Christmas I worked there was called Passage to Freedom. It tells the story of Chiune Sugihara, the Japanese vice consul in Kaunas, Lithuania, just before the Russian invasion of that country in 1940. That summer, the Japanese consulate was besieged by desperate crowds of Jews from Poland and other Eastern European countries. They were trying to get to safety before the Germans could start rounding them up. Sugihara contacted his superiors in Tokyo 3 times, at first for instructions. Then he sought permission to help these people, even though most of them couldn't jump through all the legal hoops that would allow them to be issued Japanese visas. They were refugees and in danger if they remained in Europe, and they didn't have enough money, or they hadn't had time to arrange a third country to travel to, and so on. Finally, Sugihara decided to exceed his authority, putting his career on the line and risking his family's safety by issuing transit visas to between 6,000 and 10,000 Jews facing death at the hands of the Nazis. As a result of the moral courage that Sugihara showed in Lithuania, Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem, recognized him in 1984, 2 years before his death, as one of the righteous among the nations. He was the only Japanese national who has ever received that honor. When asked the following year why he had issued the visas, Sugihara replied simply that the refugees were human beings, they needed his help, and it was the right thing to do. Moral courage. Now, there are a great many similar examples of moral courage in response to the Holocaust. The files of Yad Vashem are full of them. And this is only to be expected because Yad Vashem has recognized over 28,700 people as righteous among the nations for their efforts during this time. Another was Karl Lutz, the Swiss vice consul in Budapest, Hungary from 1942 to January of 1945, who saved over 62,000 people. Once the Nazis took over Budapest in 1944 and began deporting Jews to the death camps, Lutz received permission from the Hungarian government and the Nazis to issue 8,000 protective letters. He thought about it, and then he made a deliberate decision to interpret this permission as giving him the permission to help 8,000 families rather than 8,000 individuals. Then Lutz went around Budapest renting 76 buildings and setting them up as safe houses by hanging Swiss flags on them and declaring them annexes of the Swiss legation. That meant the buildings had diplomatic immunity and they were off limits to the Nazis and the forces of their Hungarian puppet regime. Thanks to his diplomatic skills, Lutz succeeded in persuading Hungarian and Nazi German officials, among them Adolf Eichmann, to tolerate, at least in part, his formal protection of Hungarian Jews. Lutz's efforts to undermine the Nazi genocide were so bold and so extensive that in November 1944, the German representative in Hungary asked permission to assassinate the Swiss consul. Berlin never answered. In 1965, Lutz was the very first Swiss national to be named as righteous among the nations by Yad Vashem. Now, in case you hadn't worked it out for yourself, Holocaust Remembrance Day was this past Tuesday, the 27th. The date being chosen because it was the anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz by the Russians in 1945. And our temptation in America is to say that there isn't any way something that horrible could ever happen here. But I'm afraid that attitude reveals a profound lack of self-knowledge on our part, including a lack of acquaintance with and understanding of our own history. As we all know today, the 1st of February is the beginning of Black History Month. It is also the 66th anniversary of the start of the Greensboro sit-ins in 1960. David Richmond, Franklin McCain, Ezell Blair Jr., and Joseph McNeil, 4 young black men in their freshman year at North Carolina A&T, decided it was high time to take a stand against segregation. Their immediate catalyst was the fact that McNeil had attempted to buy a hot dog at the Greyhound bus station in town during the Christmas break and had been refused service because of the color of his skin. Their plan was simple and, most importantly, nonviolent. The 4 would desegregate the lunch counter of the Woolworths on South Elm Street by going there every day, sitting in the whites only section, and being refused service. In this way, they hoped to draw public attention to this ongoing inequality in the land of the free. They would repeat the process for as long as it took to achieve their desired result. Despite opposition from various quarters, including, surprisingly, from some members of the black community who feared that the Greensboro Four and their efforts would only damage race relations, the sit-ins did eventually achieve their goal, although it took them from the 1st of February until the 25th of July to do so. The Greensboro sit-ins weren't the first such protests. The sit-down strikes of the labor movement came earlier, back in the 1930s, nor were they the first sit-ins to be used as a tactic by the growing civil rights movement. However, the extraordinary amount of publicity given to the Greensboro sit-ins by the media inspired 31 similar efforts by the end of that February, let alone the efforts that followed during the rest of the year. Groups like the legal team of the NAACP, led by future Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, ran interference for the protesters, filing lawsuits and assisting with legal defense, and above all, helping the movement to maintain legal visibility. In the end, though, it was the economic costs of continuing to uphold segregation that made the various businesses where these protests took place decide to change their ways. But I'm sorry to say, change doesn't come easy. On the 21st of March, 1933, Protestant theologian Otto Dibelius preached to the Protestant members of the newly elected Reichstag, or German Parliament, which had just reopened after the infamous fire of the previous month and new elections. In his sermon, Dibelius invoked Romans 13:1 to urge Germans to support their new chancellor because there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. If you remember the last time I brought the message a couple of weeks ago, this might sound a bit familiar. There was just one little problem with Herr Dibelius and his sermon. The new Chancellor of Germany in March 1933 was Austrian-born. His name happened to be Adolf Hitler. Now, Romans 13 has long been invoked by and on behalf of the powers that be, usually to support the status quo. That's why the passage has a rather mixed reputation. In some quarters, it has a very bad reputation. Before and during the American Revolution, Loyalists used Romans 13 to argue that it was a religious duty to obey George III because he was their divinely anointed and established king. In the antebellum South, it was invoked to support slavery. In the 1850s, Romans 13 was invoked in support of the Fugitive Slave Act, which legally obliged people in the free states up north to return escaped slaves to the plantations and the bondage they'd run away from. The Dutch Reformed Church in South Africa invoked Romans 13 to support apartheid, and so on. What a record. A year ago, Stephen Matson, the author of On Love and Mercy, a social justice devotional, posted the following on Facebook. One important spiritual lesson the life of Jesus has taught us is that the laws of the land don't dictate what is truly right and wrong. This is a theme throughout the gospel message, from Jesus defending people from the legalistic religious leaders to his very own trial and crucifixion. Legality doesn't always equal morality. Excuse me. As it's often been pointed out, slavery was legal in America before the end of 1865. So the people who helped runaway slaves escape to freedom on the Underground Railroad, which included a lot of Quakers like Levi Coffin, were breaking the law. People like Chiune Sugihara and Karl Lutz, who helped save Jews from the horrors of the Nazi concentration camps, were breaking the law. Miep Gies and the others who hid Anne Frank and her family in the secret annex for 761 days and helped them to survive were breaking the law. The Greensboro Four, those who helped them between February and July of 1960, and those in other cities who followed their example, were all breaking the law. On the other hand, all of them were acting with moral courage. Do we have the moral courage necessary for our present hour? Martin Luther King wrote in his letter from Birmingham jail in 1963 that we will have to repent in this generation not merely for the hateful words and actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence of the good people. Obviously, I can't tell you how you should respond to the present crisis. Only your conscience can do that. Nor do I think that there are any one-size-fits-all answers. Just as each of us is called to fulfill a different role in God's kingdom, each of us may very well be called to a different response when masked federal agents go around shooting and killing people in the streets. But as Bob Dylan said, you're gonna have to serve somebody. I will, however, offer you this morning's texts. 2 verses of the New Testament which Quakers, and many others, have found to be useful and reliable guides when confronted with moments of crisis similar to this one. The first is James 2:26, which says, "As the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead." In other words, if you do nothing, if you don't even pray that we find our way through and out of the current situation, you've chosen a side. And I'll give you a hint, it's the wrong one. The other verse comes from Acts 5:29. When Peter and the other apostles have been brought before the Sanhedrin in Jerusalem and commanded to stop preaching about Jesus, Peter articulates the group's response to these orders. We ought to obey God rather than men. Now, I realize that I'm preaching to the choir, as the saying goes, but that has its place, especially in ongoing situations like the present one. Enthusiasm flags and energy wanes after prolonged exposure to the same adverse stimuli. You begin to feel that nothing will ever get any better no matter what you do. It's hard not to grow weary of well-doing, hard not to lose heart. We need to recharge our batteries. If we'd been able to gather together in person today, our closing hymn would have been "Lift Every Voice and Sing," which is one of the most rousing songs I'm aware of. We'll sing it in meeting next week, God willing, if the weather allows. In the meantime, I want to leave you with a different song, and you'll see why. William Lonsdale Watkinson, an English Methodist minister, wrote in his 1907 sermon, The Invincible Strategy, that it's better to light a candle than to curse the darkness. He meant, of course, that even small, positive actions create meaningful change and are better than passive complaining during difficult times. Well, this song was written in 1982 as a pacifist response to Israel's war in Lebanon by Peter Yarrow of Peter, Paul, and Mary. They performed the song in concerts for a few years before recording it 4 years later on their album No Easy Walk to Freedom. It's called Light One Candle, and it's popular during the Jewish holiday of Hanukkah because it begins by mentioning the Maccabees, and it says that we should light 8 candles in order to remember specific events, people, and virtues. Jewish Kabbalism does the same thing with the Hanukkah candles, and Christians assign meanings to the candles on the Advent wreath. In Kwanzaa, each candle symbolizes one of the 7 principles. Anyway, I offer it today because it's a song of hope, and we need songs of hope at the moment. Light one candle for the Maccabee children, with thanks that their light didn't die. Light one candle for the pain they endured when their right to exist was denied. Light one candle for the terrible sacrifice justice and freedom demand. But light one candle for the wisdom to know when the peacemaker's time is at hand. Don't let the light go out. It's lasted for so many years. Don't let the light go out. Let it shine through our love and our tears. Light one candle for the strength that we need to never become our own foe. And light one candle for those who are suffering pain we learned so long ago. Light one candle for all we believe in, let anger not tear us apart. And light one candle to bind us together with peace as the song in our hearts. Don't let the light go out, it's lasted for so many years. Don't let the light go out, let it shine through our love and our tears. Don't let the light go out, it's lasted for so many years. Don't let the light go out, let it shine through our love and our tears. What is the memory that's valued so highly that we keep it alive in that flame? What's the commitment to those who have died that we cry out they've not died in vain? We have come this far, always believing that justice will somehow prevail. This is the burden, this is the promise, and this is why we will not fail. Don't let the light go out. It's lasted for so many years. Don't let the light go out. Let it shine through our love and our tears. Don't let the light go out. It's lasted for so many years. Don't let the light go out. Let it shine through our love and our tears. Don't let the light go out. Don't let the light go out. Don't let the light go out. Keep the faith.